Well, so for the last couple weeks, it's been super fun. DJ has walked us through a little bit of Luke's Sermon on the Plain, which is similar to Matthew's Beatitudes or Sermon on the Mount. And we talked through the first passage 2 weeks ago was about loving your enemies, which, I don't know about you, it was such an amazing the way that he communicated what it means to actually love our enemies and actually who is our enemy was just such an amazing conversation. Actually, Lisa and I came home, and Lisa was like, I don't know if I've actually ever been challenged to love my enemies in the way that he described that from the pulpit of the church before, which is really, really bizarre because that's one of the main passages from the Gospels that we take in the sermon from the life of Jesus. And then last week we talked about being judgmental and how really we as a people need to come to grips with the fact that none of us are free of judgment, meaning we are all judgmental. Like he started his message with, we need to become familiar with the fact that like we are just naturally judgmental as a people. And that's not like a pointing your finger like we're all doing something wrong, but just an acceptance of like we are a people that judge. We're in a constant state of like discernment and trying to figure things out. And actually, there are good parts of judgment in that we are trying to understand. But then we are also the negative parts of judgment, which is we are in a place where we're separating ourselves from people and not removing the plank from our own eye and really looking hard for the speck in the other's eye. But really what he kind of landed on was this idea that Jesus is getting at this thing within us that DJ called like our posture. It's like this life as a Christian taking on the way of Jesus isn't just about how we behave or the things that we do or the things that we say, but it's actually this deeper thing that Jesus is always getting at that is really just like the posture of our heart. It's like what's going on within us. There's like something deeper, that actually how we behave really is a product of kind of where we are internally. Some people like to call it like what is going on in your internal landscape, which I think is like is kind of a funny, really kind of new agey way to say it, but it really is. That's kind of what's going on. Like what's going on within us? What's our internal landscape, and how do we like live from that place? And so my question kind of in summation of that is like, why is Jesus always talking about that? Why is he always trying to draw us into this place of trying to understand what's going on within us? Because sin or the things that we do are actually not just things outside of the body, they're things kind of within us. That's where those things originate. It's the posture, it's what our heart's doing, it's what we love, it's what we worship, it's where our desires sort of lie. And so to understand this, and to understand our passage that we're going to get into tonight, I want to talk about this artist named Pablo Picasso. So I am not an art person. I mean, I love art, but I'm not like I didn't study art or something. Some of you in here probably are way more familiar with art than I am in general, especially like famous art. But Pablo Picasso he was born in, I think I've got a few notes on his life, but was born in October of 1881, died in April of 1973. He was actually Spanish-born. I thought he was Italian just because of his name, but he was a Spanish-born artist, spent most of his time in France, in Paris, and in the French Riviera. And he was known as, if you think of Picasso, you probably think of the kind of art that he created that was called the Cubist method, which was essentially almost like collage-like shapes with circles and triangles and rectangles and stuff that were all put together to make pictures of things. One of his most famous was a painting called the Guernica, which was actually, and I have a picture of it here, I think. Yeah, there it is. The Guernica. And this was actually, I didn't think this was his famous one, but based on what I read, this was kind of his most famous. And it's probably because of the size But basically, Guernica was a city in Spain that was bombed by Nazi Germany. And this was kind of his sort of sad, genocidal depiction of what that was with his Cubist style. If you want to go to the next slide, there's actually another picture of this. So that's actually how big it is, which is crazy because you just wouldn't think that. And it's in a museum, I believe, in Paris. I didn't know this either, but he also, I guess, is maybe the originator of almost like the collage method when you think of like building a collage when you were a kid, where you'd like cut out newspaper articles or whatever and you'd paste them together into a collage to make art. That was kind of his style. But interestingly enough, he had a lot of different periods in his artistic life. He lived to be, I think he was almost 93 or was 93. But there was a period between 1901 and 1904 that they specifically call the Blue Period. And it's called the Blue Period because his art was mostly in shades of blue. And this was actually because of about 3 to 4 year season of depression. He was super broke. This was before he was a well-known artist, before he kind of came into his fame as an artist or whatever. You know, it was almost post-mortem when he got the credit that was kind of due. But this period in 1901 through 1904, called the Blue Period, was sparked by a suicide of one of his close friends named Carlos. And he just fell into this kind of couple year-long depression where the style of the art that he was creating reflected sort of the posture in which his heart was in. And so you can actually go, I have a handful of his Blue Period paintings here if you want to switch to those. And they were mostly known for this kind of bluish gray kind of color scheme. There was a lot of like, you know, for lack of a better term, there was a lot of like kind of emaciated people. Blindness was a big part of the themes. There was a lot of like, honestly, like there was a lot of like nude depictions of people, I think, to enhance kind of this like sort of almost like, yeah, emaciated, emptiness that he felt, that he was propagating into his paintings. I think is there one more? Maybe there's not. And so what you see happened within Picasso's life, and not all of his paintings were like this, obviously. There were a lot of other periods of painting, but what you see happening in his life is that this state of depression, this state of sadness, the state of he was super broke, nobody knew who he was. He lost his really close friend and was trying to grapple with all that within his own life, and just this deep sense of despair. And so that was then propagated into the art that he was creating. Right? It was like the thing where he was, the posture of his internal landscape was actually visibly being created in artistic form in that period of his life. And as he came out of that 1904, you actually see him move into like a completely different type of art where this almost completely goes away. It was starkly kind of in this period. The art that he created really bore the resemblance of what was going on in his heart. You see this with music too. Like, I love music, and if you actually go through bands who have been around for longer than like 5 years, you actually see the different eras of their albums of like what was going on with, in different times. You're like, oh yeah, that was the album when this happened in their life. Or man, they were really in full stride and this was going on in their life and they created this music. And the music that they create actually resembles almost like the state in which the band or the artist was in. And interestingly enough, some of the best music, I think, comes from sometimes the like saddest parts of people's lives. Like the most melancholy creates some of the best art, because it's this like deep expression of whatever is happening. I say all this to make a point that, and this will help us sort of understand the passage and I think what Jesus is saying here, is that the things that you do, because this is true about all of us, this is just true about humanity, but the things that you do, whatever it is that you do with your time, how you behave, what you create in your life, it will bear the mark of your inner life. The things that you do, what you put your hands to, your type of work, your family, your relationships, all these different things, they will bear the marks of what is going on in your inner life. My cousin Karen is she's the curator for the Buffalo Bill Western Art Museum in Cody, Wyoming. And she is like just a Western art fanatic. And so I called her and was talking to her about this and the Blue Period and everything with her, and she had lots to say. But one of the things that she sent me was just as a quote from her, which I thought was like, man, that just beautifully articulates what I'm trying to say here. And this is what she said. I think I have it written down. She said, Brian, she said, it's arguable that all art created by human hands bears the mark of its creator, or is imbued by the feelings and sensitivities of its maker. No human-created work of art was made in a vacuum. It's the product of an individual or a group and reflects to the greater or lesser degrees their feelings and experiences. So my argument here is that whatever it is that we create, and we'll get into what that means. What does it mean that the things that we create? But whatever it is that we do, whatever it is that we create, it cannot be it cannot be untouched by the things going on in your heart. That are the things going on inside of you. That whatever it is that you do with your resources, it will always bear marks, or that it will always bear elements of your DNA. So here, we're going to read this passage in Luke, and I think this is going to help us. Jesus kind of gets onto this point as he is walking through, hey, these are the things that are going on within your heart that you need to be really careful of, and this is what it means to actually be a son or a daughter of God, is to live in this posture of love and this economy of forgiveness and this lack of judgment and this inclusive space. This is what it means to do that. It comes down to what's going on within you. And so it gives us this really amazing interpretive passage to draw from. It's Luke 6, 43 through 45. This is what he says. He says, no good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. Each tree is recognized by its own fruit. People don't pick figs from thorn bushes or grapes from briers. A good man brings good things out of the good things stored up in his heart, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. Each tree is recognized by its own fruit. Is this tracking? Is this making sense? That there's something about what is produced from us that actually reveals more about what's going on within us. That actually we can know the posture of somebody's heart. You can know, and I don't mean this in like we need to be walking around like figuring out what's going on with people. I'm just saying, as a self-diagnostic tool, we can say, I usually know what's going on within me when this thing is happening outside of me, or when I behave in this way. Or here's an old wound that I have, and I live out of that wound sometimes, and I do this in relationships. And so there are two examples of things, kind of put kind of some body to this. So I would say two ways that we do this. We do this in a lot of other ways, but just two simple ways. I would say we do it in relationships, and I think we do it in art. So in relationships, how we show up in a relationship is with others is indicative of our inner life. Right? So how I actually enter into relationship with you or the people that I work with or my spouse or my kids or my boss or the people under me or the person at the coffee shop or the clerk at the store or whatever it is, like how I show up in that relationship is actually really indicative of what is going on in the inside of Brian's heart and what's going on in my life, in my head. Right? So like here's just two basic examples. So say throughout your childhood, you felt like you inherited this feeling of being unlovable for whatever reason. And so because you sort of possess this like undergirding feeling of feeling unlovable, so now in your friendships and the other maybe even romantic relationships, you feel insecure or unworthy of love. And so you're sort of kind of always operating with this empty glass of love. Like I'm always trying to get this need met here and this need met here because I need to be told that I'm loved because I've never really felt lovable. Right? So because I have this posture, or this whatever it is that I inherited or experienced or the negative voices that I've heard in my life, I've that's buried so deep within my consciousness and my psyche that I just show up in relationships that way because it almost feels like I don't have a choice. Like I've just inherited this wound. And so I'm always trying to get that wound healed and filled. Does that make sense how that works? That's just one way. Another way would be maybe you had a huge breach of trust in a close relationship. Maybe with someone that, someone really close to you, a parent, a sibling, close friend. And because of that breach of trust, now you really struggle to trust others, maybe even including yourself. And so now how you show up in relationship with others is really protected. And you keep a lot of parts of you hidden that feel like, man, maybe this isn't going to be a safe place for me to share this. Or you're really withdrawn. Or maybe you just don't interact with that many people anymore because a lot of people, there's more bullets flying. Right? So this lack of trust or this past wound, this experience, it's almost like when you step into relationships, if that thing is not healed, like that will be propagated into the relationships around you almost without you even knowing. Like it's sometimes even a subconscious thing. Like you're not even aware that this is how you operate in relationship because this wound feels maybe so old or so normal or just I haven't done it any other way. But now those relationships then just bear the DNA of that wound or that past experience or that thing that's gone on inside of you. The other way to think about this is in art. So when we think about art, we think about things like Pablo Picasso. But I think in general, when I think about art, I think of anything that you create or put your hands to. So right now you can think about what are the things that I actually have influence over? Like what are the things that how do I create in my life? I mean, it could be as simple as spreadsheets. It could be as simple as relationships. It could be what's under your authority at work. It could be how you cook at home. It could be how you move your body or don't move your body. It could be anything that you create, anything that you have influence over, any resource that you use. Webster's describes art as being a skill acquired through experience, study, or observation. So almost anything in our life could be art because it's a product of those things. Right? So, I mean, you guys know I work with athletes, so a lot of the art that we talk about in athletics is that actually racing and competing and being a part of these different events is actually an artistic expression of who you are as an athlete. Right? You can't not watch the Super Bowl next Sunday and see those wide receivers darting in and out of the secondary and go, man, that is like an artistic form of how they juke and move around in that football game. Like that is a product of great coaching, great influence, right? Like so many different elements throughout their athletic and developmental career that brought them to a place where how they move and catch that football. I mean, it is art sometimes. Right? Watch Nick Bosa tackle somebody next Sunday, and like how that dude takes people down is a work of art. Right? But that is a culmination of so many things in his life, and he does that because those things have informed how he plays football. You know, one other way to think about this is if you were indoctrinated with the idea at some point in your life through whoever, that your identity, who you are, is wrapped up in the thing that you produce, right? So you are your success at work. You are the thing that you create. You are the result at the end of the day. If that's what you were indoctrinated with, then you will work with this kind of base note anxiety that you have to control everything that you do because the outcome that you produce actually completely reflects on who you are as a person and your value. That is going to come out in the thing that you create. Right? Like if Amy goes up to the front of a yoga class and starts to lead a class through a meditation or through a yoga practice, and she's feeling any kind of sense of insecurity, it will probably in some nuanced way, shape, or form come out in how she leads those people. Am I right? Maybe. Right? But if you start leading those people from a grounded, peaceful, rested, confident, I am valuable regardless of the end product sort of state, she will lead those people in a much healthier, more true to herself, more grounded place. Right? Because what she's producing isn't from a place of having this low-grade anxiety of what I produce is who I am. Another example would be if you feel like you're maybe even coming to church or the good things that you do in this life is almost making up for the bad things you've done in your life. You know, there are people that come to church that are like, I got to go to church because, like, man, I got a lot to make up for. I did a lot of bad things in my past life. And that, my friends, is unhelpful because that is a posture and a spirit of obligation, not of joy. And so actually how you then serve and how you do things comes from a posture of feeling like I need to do something or I need to make up for something instead of, hey, I'm just here to serve, I'm here to love, I'm a full well of joy, and I want to support whatever it is that's happening. Right? Those are two completely different postures. But the final product, even though it looks the same, maybe the form is the same, the shape is the same, the spirit is completely different. The spirit in which it's done, completely different. So the way that I was kind of processing through this, I wrote out, well, what are the postures? And some of those I just described, but what are the postures that we carry? And how do they actually impact the thing that we're doing or the thing that we're creating? And so I just wrote out 5 postures that I would say these are maybe harmful or unhelpful postures in which we live. That I would say have the potential to create bad fruit in our life. The first is this posture of validation. A posture of validation is kind of what I was saying earlier, is a posture of I don't feel validated as a person without all these other things validating me and telling me I'm valuable. So whether that's athletics or work or the clothes you have or the car you drive or like this extra thing, Like, I have to have that thing in order to feel like I'm worth something. I was actually just listening to Shia LaBeouf, the actor, talk about this. He had like a great little, he's got a lot of great things to say. I don't know if you follow any of Shia's stuff, but he's fallen in love with Jesus right now, which is just awesome. But he talks about this a lot, that he's like, I always thought happiness was something I had to acquire, instead of happiness is something that's birthed within me, in this sense of validation. Right? And as Christians, we say we believe that we possess that regardless of anything, that being made in the imago Dei, being made in the image of God, right, is enough validation already that we are made as loved, beautiful, perfect, created beings to reflect and reveal the goodness of God. And I actually am totally fine just on my own. I don't need a relationship. I don't need a significant other. I don't need a job. I don't need that shirt or that handbag or like whatever it is that we feel like we need to feel valuable. I'm already valuable. And that's a completely different posture to live in rather than the posture of being a validation. Am I right? We all live in these things. I live in all 5 of these probably within every day of the week. The second I would say is a posture of expectation. And I called it this because really what I wanted to write down was control, posture of control, because we are so good at controlling things. Even better, we're great at controlling things and acting like we're not or trying to cover it up. But expectation, do what I want. I'm going to expect this thing or you people or this thing to do what I want. And so I'm going to live in this posture of wanting to control things. Right? And this is so pervasive in our lives, in my life. I mean, I feel like I just smell hints of this all over my life, wanting to control. I mean, it seems really benign, but it's super gross. Like, I want to control weird things because I feel like that's how I want it to be, or that makes me feel good when it's this way, or it looks this way, or whatever it is. The third is the posture of obligation. Right? Not I get to, but I have to. Well, I have to drive to Farmington on Saturday. Well, I have to watch the kids on Friday. Well, I got to get this in by 2 o'clock. Right? This posture of obligation. And if that's a posture that we carry, that gets propagated and imbued, as Karen would say, into the things that we do. The fourth, I would say, is jealousy. Sounds like this. Must be nice to go on a vacation down to Tulum for a week or two. That looked really fun. Must be nice. Maybe I'll go sometime. Right? Like, we live in this posture of jealousy or coveting just the things that people have because we're unhappy with the things that we have. I never really experienced jealousy that much, I would say, throughout my life. There were a few years in Boulder where it was like almost the number one thing I felt. Like, if there was like a negative emotion I felt, it was jealousy. Because I was stuck. I was depressed. I didn't like what I was doing. I felt confused about who I was. I was broke, super broke. Lisa was in grad school. I was making like $30K a year. We were just skirting by. And my friends were flying to ride their bikes and all over Europe and do all sorts of fun things. And man, it must be nice to just have a wife that makes 6 figures and, it's gross. Like, it propagated itself into so many different relationships in my life, and it was ugly. And then the fifth, I would say, are just past hurts, which are really just looks like anger most of the time. Like, we live in a state of feeling angry about stuff, which may be justified. Anger is not a bad emotion. But when you live in a posture of anger and it's propagated into the things around you, it can really hurt other people, right? Like, hurt people. So it's something we have to become really, really comfortable noticing within ourselves when we're carrying those things. So I would say the opposites of these would be these, and I'll rip through these real quick, but so these I would say are postures helpful. These are postures harmful. Postures helpful, I would say, is a state of feeling validated. Like, I am valuable regardless of what I do. I am valuable whether you think I'm cool or not. I am valuable whether or not I'm like on the right kind of skis. I am valuable if I look like a complete idiot doing X, Y, or Z. I am valuable whether I stand up and give this talk and it's a complete flop. I'm valuable whether I lose my job or my marriage implodes or my kids hate me or whatever. Like, I am valuable regardless. Like, I am validated by God just being me. And that's more caught than taught, my friends. I'll say that. That's more something that you feel within yourself than something you learned. That's something that you have to encounter. Because when you do that, then, man, how free can you live when you are not bound up with the anxiety of needing to have all these things go your way so that you feel like you're successful in whatever way that is. The second, I would say, instead of expectation, we have influence. We get to release control of the final outcome. We get to have influence on stuff. But the final outcome is like, yeah, I want things to go a certain way, but I can release that because my identity is not tied up in that. I can do my best, but my control does not extend beyond myself. The outcome isn't mine to own. The third, I would say, instead of obligation, is joy and desire. So I don't have to, I get to. Right? That's like maybe seems like really like lame and moralistic and super vanilla or something, but like that's a huge posture shift within us. Like huge posture shift. I have to check myself constantly on that. Like, am I just doing this out of obligation, or am I doing this out of a state of joy? Like, this is an opportunity for me to step into something. The fourth, I would say, instead of jealousy, we have contentment. That really, I have everything that I need. I'm actually okay. And that maybe every season of life isn't going to look like this. Maybe every season of life you're not going to be making $30,000 a year and your wife isn't going to be making any income and you're going to be super sad and your friends all move away. And that was a season that I was in. But like maybe not every season is going to be like that. And like we're going to be all right. And like I'm going to strive to fight that like Stan was saying, that like God actually can be the thing that I can feast on. That the life that Jesus offers actually is far more beautiful than I give it credit. And then the last thing, instead of pain, past hurts, anger, is a posture of healing. Posture of healing, a place of peace with. I'll tell you this from my own life, my friends. Every single time I stand up here, every time, not every once in a while, every time I stand up and speak at a church, in a Bible study, I have to really be careful that I am not propagating my own frustration with the church, my own anger with organized religion, my own past hurts with pastors, people who discipled me, lies I've been told. I have to do everything in me to not propagate that into the things that I speak in here. Because the message that I'm saying right now to you bears Brian's DNA. Like, I would hope that these are the thoughts of God, but they're also Brian's thoughts. And so when I stand up here, I have to pray and repent. God, like, let me speak the words you want to speak, because if it's just me, like, I will lash out. I have a self-preserving, self-glorifying bone in my body, lots of them that want to scream and want to be angry and want to do a lot of things. And I've done a lot to heal from a lot of those things, just like some of you have. But I still have to be very, very, very careful. And even though you're not up here speaking, doing something like this, you are doing something like this. In whatever it is that you're doing, you are. Whether it is you're parenting 1 or 2 or 3 kids at home by yourself and nobody ever sees what's going on within your heart, the postures in which you carry will be propagated. Your DNA will be placed in your children. They will be. Your DNA will be placed, will be reflected and revealed in that meeting and how you lead those people, in the things that you do, in the things that you create. It will. Which is why, this is why Jesus is saying, he's not just talking about good people and bad people and blah, blah, blah. He's just saying, look, my friends, how you know what is going on within yourself is the fruit that it bears in your life. How you know if something is of God is the scent that it carries when you consume it. How it tastes. What's it producing? What's the fruit like, right? Like, is it beautiful? Does it smell good? Does it taste good? Does it seem like something God would birth? If God himself is the one that said, look, I'm going to stand over this vast chasm of nothingness and birth something like the world that we live in, us being the most fun and joyful part of that, if that's the God that we follow in his creative ability that he's placed within us, isn't that something that we need to carry in our life? The creation will always bear the DNA of the Creator. Whatever it is that you're doing, it's not done in a vacuum. So here's some 3 things to think about, and then we'll be done. So I would say how this applies in our life, there's 3 ways. The first is, I think, and we talk about this a lot because it's that important, but I think is we have to become extremely aware of emotionally what's going on within us. We have to have, as Christian people, we need to be hyper dedicated to our own emotional awareness. Because if you're detached from that, then you're creating and doing relationships and things in your life that are detached from really what's going on within you. Right? Emotions they're a thermometer. They're a helpful tool to help us understand what's going on within us. And you will live out of those emotions. Whether you feel like you're a stoic or not, you will live out of those emotions. Sorry, I thought it was my phone for a second. I was like, is my phone is Siri talking to me? We live out of our affect, meaning we live out of our emotions. We are actually far more precognitive people than we think, meaning we tend to live and do things out of desire and what's going on in our hearts much less than we actually think. We think we're thinking things, but really we're loving things. That's what we're motivated by. That's why we do what we do. And we have all the behaviors that reinforce what's going on within us. So we need to become super, super aware emotionally of what's happening so that we don't propagate negative stuff into the world. Amen. The second is our own personal history. One of the things we talked about in this last lab and this becoming lab was how we were formed or counterformed in the way of Jesus in our past lives. Meaning, what were the things that actually shaped you in the way of Jesus? What were the good ways that you were formed into Christ-likeness? And actually, what are the ways that you might have been counterformed, sort of away from Jesus through parenting or influences or friends or whatever it is? But your past history will greatly, greatly impact the posture of your heart and the things that you have influence over. And then the third is this, and I would say this might be one of the most helpful. This passage I think Jesus shares with us is really helpful with amoral decision-making. Amoral decision-making. So you have moral decision making, which is like what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's bad. And we tend to just go to the scriptures on that. We look to Jesus and we say what's right, which is a great thing to do. But then there's all sorts of other questions in our life. I would say the majority of our questions, which are amoral decisions, which are, should I marry this person? Should I take this job? Should I move to this city? Should I create this like that or this like that? What should I do with this thing, right? That we don't have clear direction on. And I would say this passage is super, super helpful for us because it helps us ask the question Jesus is asking, which is, what kind of fruit does it bear? Do I want to go work for this company? Well, what kind of fruit does that company bear? Is it doing good things in the world? Is there just broken, sad, angry people that leave their job, or are there people that leave those jobs or leave that group or that company that are really honored? And did they love their time there? What was the leadership like? What kind of quality of life is it fostering? Right? What's the fruit that's created? We don't just live in a world where it's like, well, the bottom line is just the final product. No, actually, how we live and our quality of life and relationships and the things that we do are actually, I would say, far more important. And Jesus is getting at that. He's saying, what does this produce? Is your marriage producing good fruit? Or is it producing bad fruit? Is it producing more and more wounds and anger and resentment? Or is it producing joy and intimacy and connection? What fruit is coming from it? Which church should you go to? I don't know. Like, what's the fruit of that? I mean, that's the first thing we asked when we came to Durango is like, what are the churches and like, what's the fruit that's being produced from them? What is being birthed? What is growing? What's the harvest that's coming from all these different communities? Is it more disillusioned people that slide into new secular atheism? Or is it like people with faith lives that are robust and are involved in the community or trying to build a culture of the kingdom of God? I don't know. But I think this passage is super, super helpful for us in those questions. What fruit is coming from this? What's the legacy that's being left? Do I want to participate in that? So I think I'm going to end here, but I think practically this is such a super helpful passage for us. It should be a super, I think, convicting passage for us in that we need to be really careful about what's going on within us. Which I think probably, my friends, is maybe the most important thing that you hear tonight is that what is going on within you ought to be the most important thing to you. Right? Like maybe the church thing to say is like, well, you need to be more concerned what's going on with the people around you. And I would say, no, that's a byproduct of actually knowing what's going on with you first. That you can't serve somebody else without you being healthy first, right? Like you put your own oxygen mask on first in the airplane. So this is like a huge work for us all the time. Because the things that you create will bear your DNA. Let's pray. God, I thank you for just tonight, and I thank you for just these people here and this community. And I pray that somehow this passage would speak to our hearts, that we would take seriously the things that we put our hands to and how we impact that, and know that the kingdom of God really starts here. It's not out there, it's here within. So, Spirit, fall fresh on us, guide us to a deeper understanding of what it means to possess your posture. Pray this in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Love you guys. Thanks for being here tonight. let's say this like we say it every week. We've reached up to God. Now let's reach out to our world. Grace and peace.